Okay, so let's go ahead and create this blog from scratch. So feel free to follow along here. I'm going to go from creating a new file all the way up to finishing this blog here. So the first thing that we'll want to do, I'm going to keep the solution open just so that I can reference it and make sure we have colors correct and font sizes. But the first thing that we really want to do is get our files set up. So I have two files, a blog.html, and it has nothing in it so far except the title, blog, and it's linked to a style sheet called blog.css that's empty. So this is just the two files that we're going to need. And now let's go ahead and fill them in. So we have to decide when we're doing something like this, where do we start? And I think the best solution is to start with some of this markup in our HTML and styling some of it. But we don't have to get everything there perfect word for word before we actually style things. So I would start by maybe putting a paragraph or two and one of these headers in our body. And to do that, this is lorem ipsum text, except it's bacon ipsum, which is just at baconipsum.com. Click on Give Me Bacon and just copy one of the paragraphs. I'm just going to use what I have here, but the words aren't so important as long as there are words there. So if you want to use bacon ipsum, go ahead. But if you if you object to bacon, you can pick any other ipsum or just make up your own words or actually put your own blog post there. That would be ideal. And then I'm going to also just put one of the headings here. And one note, it might make sense to make these in H1, both of them, but generally the rule is you want to have one H1 on the page. It should be the biggest thing on your page. So because we have multiple multiple headings here, multiple article titles, I'm going to go with H2. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter at all because we're going to style everything about it. We're going to change the font size. We're going to change the color and all of the things that would be set by making it an H1 versus an H2. Those differences will be eliminated anyways. So I'm going to go with H2. And I'm just going to say this is my first article. Not the most creative title. Let's save it. And let's just preview it to start. So open it up. Okay, so there's our blog so far. So we have a bunch of decisions to make. The first place that I might start is in getting this body to have this border. So I did provide the colors in the last video. I'm just going to copy this color here, and I'm going to give the body a border. So we'll select the body, and then all we have to do is say border, and it's 20 pixels, solid, this gray color. And let's check that out. Okay, so it doesn't quite look the way that we would want it to look, but it's getting there. We have the border. Let's make it full size so we can really compare. So another thing that you'll notice is that our border, there's one problem, which is it goes all the way. The whole body takes up the entire page, versus here, the body only takes up part of the page, and then there's spacing on either side. Then there's also this spacing on the inside that we don't have because our words in our text go right up against the border. So let's start by solving that problem. And to fix that, of course, we need padding. So this is 20 pixels padding on all sides. You can see there's padding at the bottom and the left and the right as well. So in the body, we're just going to assign padding 20 pixels on all four sides, and we get this. Okay, so that's a little bit closer. The next thing that we should work on is getting the width correct. And it's not just a matter of getting the width to be the right size when it's full screen, but also as it shrinks down. You'll see that it stays, this is 700 pixels, it stays at 700 pixels for a while, and then it shrinks and scales. So we want to make sure we can get that to happen. So we're going to use a little bit of a trick. And then the one other thing we want to do is make sure that it's centered. Right now, well, we can't really tell, but it's not centered. It's going to be on the left side. So let's go ahead and add the width in first. So let's say width 700 pixels and save. And this is what I was talking about. It's on the left, and we want to center it in the middle. And to do that, we can use the margin auto trick that I had talked about in the box model video. So we're going to set a margin, and we're going to just use the shortcut. So we're going to do 0 pixels up top and bottom, and then auto on the left and right. Remember when we just do 2 here rather than 4, this is top and bottom and this is left and right. So that centers it for us automatically. But then you'll notice by giving it a 0 top and bottom, it's now right up against the top. And this one here is not. We have some space. There's 20 pixels right there. So that's a simple fix, just the same line. Change that back to 20 px. We do need the px. We didn't before because when it's 0, you can just leave it as 0. But when there's a number, we need the px. Okay, so that's looking pretty close. The only thing is that as we shrink, we want this to stay 700 pixels until it can no longer stay 700 pixels and we want it to shrink down. And it's pretty easy to do that actually. All that we want to do is change this to be max width, and then we're going to assign it a percentage width. And what this says is make it 80% when you need to, but at a maximum, make it 700 pixels. So I'll show you what that looks like. When we refresh, nothing changes because it's added to maximum 700 pixels. So it checks if 80% would be more than 700 pixels, which it would in this case. So it stays at 700, still stays at 700, until right here where it starts to shrink. That's where 80% now is less than 700 pixels. Okay, so now we have our basic body set up. The next thing that I'd like to do here is get our font going. So again, if we go to the notes that I have from the last video, the font is called Source Sans Pro. So let's go ahead and head over to Google Fonts and look for Source Sans Pro. So I have it open here, but again, it's just google.com/fonts. And let's do a search for Source Sans Pro. It's right here. Add to collection. Use. And now we have a choice. Which font weights do we want? And I actually didn't tell you this in the original video, but this is just the normal font face or the font weight, 400, and this is a heavier weight, it's bolded. So we're going to want both of those. So normal and bold, 400 and 700, and that's it. We go down here and copy this link. We can get rid of Google Fonts now. And we're going to go to our HTML and just paste that link in. And now we have the ability to use Source Sans Pro. So let's assign it to both paragraphs and H2s. And we also want it to be on these dates. So what we could do is select paragraph and say font family, Source Sans Pro. And we could do the same thing for H1s. But that's not a really good use of our CSS. Our code is going to be a little bit repetitive. Every element that we want to use it on, we would have to go and add this in. So what we do instead is just apply it to the body. And by applying it to the body, everything inside of it will inherit it. So font family, Source Sans Pro, and save, refresh, and there we go. We have our H1 using it, or H2, and we have our paragraph. So that's looking pretty good so far.